Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Jenna and this is my Victober reading wrap up. So let's talk Victober. I read 8 books for Victober. And if you're unfamiliar, Victober is Victorian October, where people on Bookstagram and people on BookTube and people who I guess are not connected to any of these things, maybe, read books written in the Victorian era. And the Victorian era is the time of Queen Victoria's reign. So basically, I think 1837 or 1838 to early 1900. Okay, she ruled for a really long time. And so books written within that era are called Victorian. And I read a lot of them. I've read a lot of them in the past. The Victorian era is one of my favorite eras to read fiction from. And I've had a hard time. I knew this was coming and I knew this was happening. I've heard about Victober for so many years, but I've never really participated because I read a lot of Victorian literature anyway. But this time I was like, nope. I want to do it. I want to join a bunch of people who are reading Victorian literature at the same time around the globe. And I want to read books that I haven't read before. So they do a series of challenges that they put out. Like this time, I don't remember what all of them were, but one of them was to read a Victorian novel that is in your favorite genre. One was to read letters or diaries, and so on and so forth. So they give you some challenges. And then they all read Shirley together. And I put stickers on the front of my books that show the year of publication because I was curious, like, how wide is the breadth of my reading for Victober this month? And so this is 1849 on it. But they read Shirley and I did not read it. I listened to it. I have read it at least 4 times that I can recall clearly. I probably have read it at least one other time before that in my teens, but I think I DNF'd it. I love this book. I do. It is not my favorite by Charlotte Bronte, but I do love this book. I thought I wasn't going to get to it. I did actually get to this, even though I thought I wouldn't. But I'm not going to talk about it a lot today because I know they're going to do a big discussion. And I'll probably do a Bronte post. I'll probably do one dedicated to Emily, one dedicated to Anne, and one dedicated to Charlotte. And in that video in the future, I will discuss Shirley at length. So there's that one. And then I had a DNF. I had a book, and for those of you who don't know, a DNF is a did not finish. So from 1884, I was excited about when I read about this book. And I don't know if I finished my sentence, but I was trying to pick books that I had never read before, ones that maybe I hadn't even heard of before, if I could find them. And I found a lot. It was awesome. So, I mean, I know that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of titles that I don't know from the Victorian period, but finding copies of them can prove to be difficult and expensive sometimes. Everything that I got, I was able to get secondhand from Better World Books. I mentioned them in my first BookTube video, my newbie tag. I mentioned them again in my second video, my Victober tag. Not because they're paying me to or because they're sponsoring me in any way, but because I just absolutely and completely adore them. And if you don't know about betterworldbooks.com, then you need to find out. All that being said, I DNF'd this one, Esther, by Henry Adams. The back says, in Henry Adams's memorable tale of old New York, the spirited young painter Esther Dudley is introduced to Stephen Hazard, an Episcopal clergyman at St. John's. But her views, learned from her father, are radical, and he is preoccupied with clerical duties. Initially, each is repelled by the other. After Esther receives a commission to refurbish the decorations of the church, however, Stephen becomes an enthusiast of her painting and a companion to her ailing father. Esther finds herself falling for the preacher and, following her father's death, even becomes engaged to him. But must she compromise her personal convictions to marry him? Yeah, it drew me in. And then the writing was so slow and so dull that I could not continue on. I'm sure that this is a lovely book. It is not the book for me. Yeah, I DNF'd it. That's all I'll say. Now, here they are. The books that I read, all of them for the first time, and absolutely loved, in order from least loved to most loved. Note that I did not dislike a single one of these books. I love them all. And that is a rare, rare experience. But here they are. The most least liked, we'll say that, is 1872's In a Glass Darkly by Sheridan Le Fanu. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's how I say it. This is a book of ghost stories. It is absurd and creepy and awkward and completely and utterly engaging. One of the stories is one that I think I've seen other Victober readers this month talking about, Camilla. And it has really forward-thinking overtones, not undertones. It is about a vampiress, and it's ahead of its time. That's what I'll say. Another one, which just humored me to no end, was about a little demon that appears to a preacher who has opened himself up to being susceptible to being, I don't know, hounded, attacked spiritually by demons because he drinks too much green tea. Yeah, it's absurd. It's weird. It's a product of its time. It's forward thinking as well. And just so delightfully weird. That's what I'll say. It's delightfully weird. If you like ghost stories and you like the Victorian era, I highly suggest you pick this up. And also, just how beautiful is that cover? I love that cover. I love these Oxford editions. I don't get enough of them. My next least favorite, because they're all my favorites this week or month. My next one is The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This gets my award for worst cover, but the contents were pretty awesome. I had never read this, and mostly because, like I've said before, I'm an English teacher. I actually teach humanities, but I've been an English teacher straight up for longer than I've taught humanities. And once upon a time, I had to teach the Scarlet Letter, and I absolutely despised the Scarlet Letter. For reasons that I can do a video about in the future, but it is one of my least favorite books on the planet to ever have been written. And so I just never read anything else by Nathaniel Hawthorne, but I had watched, there's an old black and white, I had never read anything else by him, but I had watched this old black and white rendition of it that starred Vincent Price. So if you don't know who Vincent Price is, he's an old-timey actor who absolutely loved being creepy and doing creepy movies, and he's in it, and he doesn't really play that creepy of a character in it, but he becomes in his career the king of creepy. And so I had seen that movie because I used to watch a lot of black and white movies. I love black and white movies, and I kind of thought I knew the story. And I wasn't super impressed. It was fine, but I wasn't super impressed. To be honest, I don't know what made me decide, hey, I want to read that book. But I'm so glad that I did. It's a very different story than that probably 1940s movie tells, that deals with male and female gender roles. It deals with ideas of witchcraft. It deals with family legacy. It deals with themes of hope and despair. I was really actually very impressed. It's a very thoughtful, very engaging, very readable book. And I did not expect that from Nathaniel Hawthorne. And I kind of wish that people would teach this in school instead of Scarlet Letter. It's a much better book. I'll just say it. It's a much better book. This one, 1884's Ramona by Helen Hunt Jackson. My book is looking a little worse for the wear. It's an old donated library copy. I'll just read you the back because it's just phenomenal. Ramona is a tale of true love triumphant, of exotic, passionate characters beset by tragedy, of pure-hearted nobility at odds with greed. Set in old California, this powerful and romantic narrative richly depicts the life of the fading Spanish order, the decline of tribal communities, and inevitably the brutal intrusion of white settlers. Ramona, an illegitimate orphan, grows up as the docile, beautiful ward of the overbearing Senora Moreno. But her desire for the Native American Alessandro makes her an outcast and a fugitive. This moving story with grand melodramatic touches was linked with Uncle Tom's Cabin as one of the great ethical novels of the 19th century. A bestseller in 1884, Ramona was both a political and a literary success, and it will move modern readers with its sympathetic characters and its depiction of the Native American struggle in the early West. I loved this book. I read it in one weekend. I could not put it down. It is so readable. It is so easy to read. And it made me really emotional. There's one scene near the end, and I can't give you too much context, but Ramona's husband has slaughtered one of the steers that they own so that they can have meat. And white settlers have come through and are accusing Mexicans and Indians of having stolen the steers from prosperous landowners in the area. And one of the women who Ramona and her husband are staying with gets scared because she knows that these men are coming to try and accuse them of stealing, right? If they have meat, they must have stolen it. That's the assumption. And so she drags the carcass and hides it under the bed. And because of that action, some very terrible things happen. Because of that action, some very terrible things happen. Whereas if she hadn't made it look suspicious, if this woman hadn't made it look suspicious, she easily could have proven, because the meat was still warm, that it was their own fresh slaughter. And the intensity of the moment has stayed with me so very clearly. It's just phenomenal writing, phenomenal story. Blew my mind mostly because I've never heard of it. Another fun thing about this book, the author, Helen Hunt Jackson, best friends with Emily Dickinson. Yeah, look her up. All right. My next, getting closer to my favorite of the favorites, is this one, The Story of an African Farm by Olive Schreiner. I had never heard of this book. I think I have never read anything from before the 20th century that was written by or about South Africa. And this book is written by a South African woman, an Afrikaans woman, and it is set in South Africa, and it is bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre. It is dark, it is twisted, and it is very forward thinking. It is chock full of revolution and Marxist ideals and feminism. She is definitely a proto-feminist. Let me just read you the back real quick here. It says, two cousins grow up in the 1860s on a lonely Bible-dominated farm in the thirsty mountain veld. Im is fat, sweet, and contented, a born housewife. Lyndall, clever, restless, beautiful, and doomed. Let me tell you, doomed is an understatement. Their childhood is disrupted by a bombastic Irishman, Bonaparte Blinkens, who claims blood ties with Wellington and Queen Victoria, and so gains uncanny influence over the girl's gross, stupid stepmother. As the story of Im and Lyndall's two careers, both in their way tragic yet fulfilled, is taken to its end, we learn not merely of a backwater in colonial history, but of the whole human condition. This book blew my mind in a totally different way from this book. This one blew me away with its majesty and its epic, its sweeping epic, and its extreme sadness. This book blew me away with its craft, with its character development, with its ability to spin for you a tale, a reality that is so obviously something that can exist, but is so dark, and yet you read it and you have this constant feeling of discomfort, but never get thrown to the other side of, I just can't keep going. I don't want to ruin it for you. A scene that really stands out in my mind comes early on, so I don't think I'll ruin anything by sharing this. But there's a boy, and he is he's doing shepherd duties, and he has meat with him, and he creates an altar for God, and he expects God, like in the Bible, to send fire down to consume this meat. And he waits and waits and waits, and it never happens. And so obviously he believes that not that God's not there, but that God's not pleased with him. But the way that the author is able to set this scene up, all showing, no telling at all. It's all showing. It's all action and thought and dialogue. You feel so much of that weight and that darkness of rejection that boy feels. This book is not for the faint of heart. This book is highly, highly recommended. Oh, I'm down to my 3. So these are my top 3. Okay. So number 3 of the top 3, Effie, and I say breast, but maybe it's Brist. I'm not sure. This was so good. This was so good. This was like, I don't even have words. I kind of want to say it's a little bit like Madame Bovary, but it's nothing like Madame Bovary. I don't know why I have that, or maybe Lady Chatterley's Lover, but it's nothing like Lady Chatterley's Lover. It is so conversational, this book. It is so shocking, and yet the whole time you can tell exactly what's going to happen. The foreshadowing in this book is phenomenal. I'm just gonna read the back for you. There's so many things going through my mind. There's so many scenes. I'm kind of trying to decide which scene do I want to tell you about. But there are too many. There are too many scenes in this book that I would want to tell you about. So hang on. So it says, Effie Brist is the story of a woman's adultery and its absurd and pitiful consequences. Fresh, impetuous, and enchanting, Effie is pitted against the cold unreason of Innstetten, her husband, and the wiles of Krampus, professional amorist, gambler, and society man, and against the implacable forces of Prussian rectitude. Her fate mirrors a dazzling complex of social and moral issues in a remarkable and haunting novel, which achieves a perfect balance between the conflict of the individual and a careful, accurate documentation of a social milieu. That sounds dull. This book is anything but dull. It starts with Effie and her mother. And I have underlined so many things in this book, but let me just start. I'll just pick something here, and I don't even know what it is. I'm just going to read you something that I've underlined, okay? But Effie dear, this is Effie's mother. But Effie dear, we must be careful how we live above all, because we're women. And when you arrive in Kessen, a little place where you'll hardly see a street lamp at night, people will laugh at that sort of thing. So she wants to buy. This is the scene where she is buying her trousseau. She's a young girl, and she's been engaged to this man who was her mother's suitor when her mother was her age. Okay? Her mother did not marry him, and in fact moved away. She married somebody else and moved away. And so they then retouch base at some point, and Effie ends up being proposed to, even though he doesn't know her. It's a little bit of an arranged marriage, although she could have said no. But Effie is of the mind that, why not? Why not? That's Effie's thought through the entire book. Why not? And she has to go through a lot of things to learn why not. So she marries her mother's old boyfriend. And she's getting her trousseau. And one of the things that she wants in her trousseau is a fur coat. Okay. So Mother is saying, but Effie dear, we must be careful how we live, above all because we're women. And when you arrive in Kessin, a little place where you'll hardly see a street lamp at night, people will laugh at that sort of thing. And they won't just laugh. The people who aren't very fond of you, and there are always such people, will say that it's bad upbringing. And a lot of them will say worse things than that. Okay. Oh, this is, so there is that part about the fur coat, but this is where she's talking about how she wants to decorate her house when she gets when she gets to her new home. And she wants to excuse me, she wants to have a red light. She wants to decorate it in a Japanese fashion and to have a red like filter for her gas lights. And her mother is telling her that she can't have red lights. So she responds to that. She says, all right then, nothing Japanese and no red light, but I confess that I had imagined it all lovely and poetic to see everything bathed in a red glow. Frau von Brist was touched. She stood up and kissed Effie. You're just a child, lovely and poetic indeed. That's just imaginings. Reality is different, and it's often a good thing, instead of a red glow, to have it quite dark. Effie does bring a red glow to everything. And she would have been better off to keep herself in the dark, for sure. The writing in this is vibrant. It's a translation. It's translated from the German by someone who doesn't get named, by Douglas Parme. And Douglas does a great job, and a phenomenal job of translating that. Absolutely enjoyed that book. Want to read more by Theodore Fontaine. Interestingly, Theodore Fontaine, although Prussian, he did study and write in English in the UK. And so I think that it's probably very translatable, because he's also thinking, how would this work in English as he's writing in German? All right, my second favorite read. This is my second favorite read, and believe me, this was so hard, especially when you find out that my first favorite read wasn't actually a Victorian novel. It's shy by just 1 year. It's 1 year too early. But my favorite read for Victober that falls within the years of the Victorian era is dun, 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 Hester by Margaret Oliphant. I have never read anything by Margaret Oliphant. I had never heard of Margaret Oliphant. I was thinking that I would read Wives and Daughters, because I had never read Wives and Daughters. And so I was looking at books by Gaskell, and I've read North and South and a couple of other lesser known works by Gaskell. And I love them, like Ruth and things like that. I love them. So I was going to read Wives and Daughters. But this popped up as a recommended. If you're interested in this book, then check out this book. And I thought, I've never even heard of Margaret Oliphant. And so I clicked on it and read the back, or I read the blurb, which is the same as what's on the back. It says, the aging Catherine Vernon, jilted in her youth, has risen to power in a man's world as head of the family bank. She thinks that she sees through everyone and rules over a family of dependents with knowing cynicism, but there are two people in Redborough who resist her. One is Hester, a young relation with a personality as strong as Catherine's, and as determined to find a role for herself. The other is Edward, Catherine's favorite, who she treats like a son. Conflict between young and old is inevitable, and in its depiction of the complex relationships that develop between the three principal characters, Hester is a masterpiece of psychological realism. In exploring the difficulty of understanding human nature, it is also a compulsive story of financial and sexual risk-taking that mounts towards a searing climax. Again, that sounds very dull. This book is anything but dull. I ended up getting it because the idea of a female-run family bank was curious to me. And when I'm reading Victorian literature, I'm often looking for historical information as much as I'm looking for story. I'm actually currently, this is a topic for another thing, but I'm currently writing a book set in the Victorian era based on an actual happening, based on something that is historically real and true. Nothing historically significant, but significant to the people who it happened to. And so I am always looking for how women are portrayed in books of the time, because the book that I'm writing focuses on the lives and choices of several sisters. And they were Victorian. I am very much aware of the fact that I have limitations in my understanding of life for women during that time. And I also have assumptions that I make all the time about what women were and what they could be and what would be expected of them, and what society might do if women worked outside of those expectations. You know, I can read lots of commentaries and historical accounts and the popular books of the time, but they all kind of give me the same picture. When I find something like this, 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 that give me women written about or written by people who are living in that time period that don't fit the norm or the average report of life for women in that day, I get really excited because the women that I'm writing about don't fit. Okay. I think that's why I disliked this one so much, because it's the same story I've read again and again and again. That's what it is. I hadn't thought that through until just now. So when I read that this was about a woman who was running a bank, I was like, well, I have to read about Catherine now for sure. Catherine Vernon. And what a character Catherine Vernon is. Now, I like Hester. I do. I really, really like the character of Hester. She is cheeky. She's a brat. She is forward and uncultured, capable and intelligent, empathetic, and can be very kind. But who's that quote? There's some quote where once her good graces are lost, they're lost forever. I can't remember who it's. That's a paraphrase of a quote about somebody in some literature. And that's who Hester is. Once you've offended her, it's over. That's also who Catherine is. Although for her own devices, Catherine can overlook. She won't forget, but she can overlook an offense, right? And those two, from the very moment they meet each other, do nothing but offend each other. They just offend and offend and offend and offend and offend, even to the point where when they try to do something good, it's still an offense. Okay? The way that this book is written is glorious. There's a whole scene where Hester is going to be proposed to, and her mother is so excited. She and her mother they get along, and she loves her mother, but she's always been in this protective role for her mother. And there's a scene where the mother is so excited because she approves of this match so much because it's going to get them back in the house that was the mother's before some catastrophe that I won't talk about fell upon the family. And so the suitor who wants to propose to Hester lives in this house. And if Hester marries him, then they get to move back in. And that's all the mother can think about, is getting back into her place, right? She also thinks that he's a nice boy and it'll be a nice match for her daughter, better than any match that she could think of or imagine. And so she's very excited. But Hester decides that she's going to spend the evening, instead of hearing about how this man is going to propose to her from her mother, she wants to spend the evening having dinner with an elderly couple who are destitute and distant cousins of, or not, maybe they're not distant cousins, distant relations of Catherine. And so she goes to have dinner with them because she enjoys their company, because they tell good stories and they laugh and they're good people. And they don't have a lot of these put on expectations about society and behavior, and the mores of their day don't really affect them on a friendly basis, right? So she goes to be there and to be herself, and she stays very late. And there's this whole, like, that's happening, but at the same time, the mother is having dinner by herself and feeling sorry for herself and feeling ignored. And just the way that it's written is just, you see it. It's so vibrant. The writing is so vibrant. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend this book. It has teeny tiny little writing and it's very long. So know what you're getting into, but highly recommend that book. Now, last but definitely not least, my absolute favorite not Victorian novel that I read for Victober. The Pickwick Papers. My copy is very much the worse for the wear, but this book is a delight. I was laughing out loud. It made me cry. It made me cry when it was over because I didn't want it to be over. It is forever long, okay? But it wasn't enough. It's one book, but it's also vignettes, kind of. There's so many storytellers within the story. There's stories within stories within stories. And it's Dickens' first, like, full-length novel, if you can think of it like that, because it is still stories within stories, but it's following one group of men. And I honestly think that this is the only book I personally have ever read. I know they exist, right? But I have never picked them up. I think it's the only book I've ever read that's about male friendship. And it's delightful. You can see all of the things that Dickens will become in this book. And you can see most of the things that Dickens will write about and become passionate about, is passionate about as a young man in his 20s when he's writing these. His eye for capturing the reality of society and of human interaction and motivation is here. When I first started reading at the beginning, I thought, oh my word, what have I gotten into? This is going to be a DNF. I have plans and hopes to read all of Dickens next year in order. And so I thought I would start with Pickwick now and get a jump start, because there's a lot of books and they're all really thick, right? Except for maybe Hard Times. And so, excuse me, so I thought I'd get a jump on it and I'd read Pickwick. And when I started, I was like, oh my goodness, this is awful. I'm never going to be able to do this. I guess that I truly am just a Little Dorrit lover. Like, that's the only one by Dickens that I love. I've read it 3 times. I'm reading it now in its serialized release. Like, I'm reading the chapters month by month as they were released originally. And I'm absolutely enjoying it and loving it. And it's my 3rd read of it. And I enjoy watching movie adaptations, BBC movie adaptations of Dickens, but I was like, I can't read this. But I kept going, and I started off with, I downloaded a audiobook version that had an introduction by Neil Gaiman. I love Neil, and we're on a first name basis. Not really, I just called him Neil. And I listened to him talk about how he read it for the first time and how for him it was a book of sadness, how many people laugh at this book and how it is very funny, but he also sees in it a great deal of sadness. And I wanted to get there. And so I kept going. And I am so glad that I did. In fact, I currently have goosebumps as I think about it. I had obviously a very real and emotional response to this book. Some of my favorite parts: the madman, the bagman's story, the chair. It's just so bizarre. If you've read this, you'll know these. The frog poem, laudanum, the ghost moves to sweeter climes. Oh, this is the story of when a man is renting rooms and he realizes that they're haunted, and he asks the ghost, why do you stay here? You could go anywhere you want. This isn't such a great place. And the ghost is like, never thought of that. I think I'll go somewhere nicer. The goblin who stole the sexton. Just delightful storytelling. Just delightful. So this is my favorite read of Victober. It took commitment. It took reading it every single day to get through it in, I think it took me about 3 weeks. I started a little bit before, a couple of days before October, and those 2 days or 3 days actually, I think, were the hardest going. After that, it's almost like his writing style changes. And he got into a groove, and that groove was very comfortable. And I could read huge sections of it in one sitting. But also because it's told in these little like module stories as well, you could just read a little bit here and a little bit there. You could read one little chapter or one part of one chapter and walk away, and then come back and not have to like remember what was going on before, where am I, who's doing what. So anyway, if you don't know what Pickwick Papers is, let me read a little bit of the back. It says Charles Dickens's satirical masterpiece, The Pickwick Papers, catapulted the young writer into literary fame when it was first serialized in 1836-37. It recounts the rollicking adventures of the members of the Pickwick Club as they travel about England, getting into all sorts of mischief. Laugh out loud funny and entertaining, the book also reveals Dickens' burgeoning interest in the parliamentary system, lawyers, the poor laws, and the ills of debtor's prison. As G.K. Chesterton noted, before Dickens wrote a single real story, he had a kind of vision, a map full of fantastic towns, thundering coaches, clamorous marketplaces, uproarious inns, strange and swaggering figures. That vision was Pickwick. There's one scene where Pickwick thinks he's doing a good deed, and he finds himself in the backyard of a girls' school to try and warn the mistress there that one of the girls is going to try to elope that night. But of course, he ends up being the brunt of it all, and they think that he is up to no good, because what is he doing in the middle of the night in the backyard of a girls' school, hiding behind a door? It's just laugh out loud funny. It is a laugh out loud funny. And then there is a story that I won't go into because it is very atmospheric, of long awaited for and planned revenge. That's one of the debtor's prison stories. Yeah, all of human emotion is encapsulated here in the Pickwick Papers. My number one read for Victober. My number one non-Victorian Victober read. It's right there on the cusp. It can touch it. It can reach out and touch Victorian times. So just to recap, we've got the Pickwick Papers, Hester, Effie Breast, Story of an African Farm, Ramona, Through a Glass Darkly. This one got out of order. House of Seven Gables, Shirley, which I'm sure they're going to do talks about. Yeah, I won't talk about it. They're going to do talks about it. And my DNF, Esther. Mostly, I just realized through this talk, because the story's been told before. Not exactly that story, but it's been told before. Better. It's been told better. So good try, Henry Adams, but no thank you. So this has been my Victober wrap up, and I think I'm going to read a lot of fantasy in the next month. We'll see. Cozy things for November and fantasy. I know a lot of people are reading nonfiction, and I might try to throw that in there too. We'll see. I'll do a TBR real soon. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.